Darren and his wife Dawn hosted. There were 7 of them: Dawn and her husband, 3 of Darren's friends, and Darren and Dawn's 2 small children. Dinner was prepared, served, and eaten on the terrace under the stars. Darren put the 2 cranky and grumpy children to bed, while Dawn openly flirted with her husband's friends. More beer and wine were drunk. 5 adults decided to turn on the jacuzzi and climb into it. They turned on the music. Dawn promised to change into the skimpiest bikini. Darren was going to lend his friends some swim trunks, although Dawn and the guys were wondering if they should wear anything at all. Dawn was ready to work her magic. She was ready to do magic. Tonight was the perfect night to lure my husband's friends into bed. Dawn felt the moment had come. Husband Dawn was also sure of the timing, and Darren's 3 friends, Mark, Peter, and Dale, knew it just as well. Dawn and her husband's 3 friends desperately wanted this to happen. Darren still needed a little convincing and pushing, but Dawn thought she could do it. She was sure her husband wouldn't mind the boys staying the night when she cast her spell on Darren and, as usual, made him do what she wanted. Darren's mother considered Dawn one of a kind. Dawn insisted on being the center of attention of everyone around her. She liked to be looked at and touched. She always became irritated if any man did not notice her. Sometimes she would fly into a rage, say something sarcastic, throw drinks in people's faces, and then run away in anger if a handsome man didn't pay attention to her or didn't flirt with her. Most men liked Dawn, despite her outrageous antics. Most women couldn't stand Darren's wife. She was an annoying, horny bitch, as many believed. Darren understood why his 3 friends wanted to play with his wife. Dawn was amazing. She was small and graceful. She was so beautifully built. As Darren's friend Dale said, she was finely tailored. She had shiny dark hair, lively brown eyes, a cute upturned nose, and full lips. Her skin was tanned and without freckles. She was incredibly sexy. A real hot wife. Dawn was known for her bad behavior and lack of filter after drinking too much wine. She could walk around the house all day in a bad mood, muttering to herself or complaining to her husband, but as soon as she had a few drinks, her behavior would completely change, no matter how irritated she had been an hour earlier. Just a minute ago, she was in a bad mood, and then she was already dancing on the tables and starting to take off her clothes. Dawn always kept Darren on his toes, that's for sure. "You have such a dirty mind, honey," Darren would sometimes warn her, "and you say whatever's on your mind as soon as you drink too much." "Yeah, that's right, honey," Dawn usually answered. "And you know what? I also have a sexy body to go along with my dirty mind and stupid antics. I can wrap any man around my finger if you just give me enough time. Yeah, I believe you, darling, I do. And you have to trust me, Darren, I do this to you all the time. You are such a provocateur and love to tease, Dawn. I love it. I love you."
Yeah, that's exactly who I am, and I know you love it, Darren. That's why I act this way.
"I can make you and your friends horny in 2 minutes. Do you remember how I made your boss horny at the Christmas party? All I did was just dance with him a little. He was shaking like a leaf when he finished dancing with me. Yes, 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 I remember. He just hung on you, and you were on him like Velcro. I thought he was going to undress you and have sex with you right on the dance floor in front of everyone. His wife got so mad at you, Dawn, and you just laughed in her face. I thought I was going to get fired when you threw your drink at her and ran away like a spoiled brat. I should have put you on my knees and given you some serious sleep for such behavior." "Oh, you promise, Darren," Dawn said. "But in the end, you weren't fired, but on the contrary, you were promoted, right, dear?" "Yes, exactly," Darren replied. "But however, there was also that time when you gave all those old people a slow, sexy dance behind closed doors in the nursing home, and then gave my brother a hot lap dance on his birthday. Do you remember that?" "Of course I remember, Darren. You won't forget this. I was kissing these old gentlemen while your back was turned. I was lucky that I got out of there in one piece. And with your brother, well, he didn't have the stamina to have me on his lap. He was like your boss. You're just a crazy, sexy girl. You just need to constantly create drama around yourself. Yeah, this is me in my natural form. Dawn was ready to work her magic. She was ready for witchcraft. Tonight was the perfect night to get my husband's friends into bed. Dawn felt the moment had come. Husband Dawn thought so too, and Darren's friends Mark, Peter, and Dale knew it too. Dawn and her three husbands desperately wanted it. Darren still needed a little convincing, but Dawn knew she could do it. She was sure her husband wouldn't mind if she spent the night with his friends once she got him to submit as usual. Darren heard his wife's footsteps before he saw her. He heard the sharp, monotonous click of her heels as she walked down the long, dark hallway from the living room to their bedroom. Darren's heart began to beat wildly in his chest, and his breathing became ragged. Darren knew that his sexy wife was going to ask him for permission to have fun with his friends. Darren nervously rummaged through his bedroom drawers, his hands shaking as he looked for the swim trunks he planned to lend to his friends. When Dawn entered the bedroom, she walked up behind her husband and hugged him tenderly, slowly wrapping her arms around his body. Darren winced and took a sharp breath. "Are you okay, Darren?" Dawn whispered, clinging to his back. "Didn't I scare you too much, honey?" Darren responded with a soft laugh. Dawn smiled, pressing her nose to his bare back and exhaling onto his skin. "Darren," she called quietly. Yeah, I'm fine, honey, just a little nervous," Darren replied calmly, and they both laughed again. "Really, Darren?" Dawn continued with a smile, and then slowly lowered her hand down, running over her husband's stomach, touching his trunks and feeling the bulge. "Not only are you nervous, but you're also a little excited, right, honey? I can't even imagine why." Darren laughed again, but the nervous tension was palpable in his every movement. "Can't you guess why?" Darren said with a smile, trying to turn around to see his wife, but Dawn held him in place, pushing his face against the wall. "Don't move," she ordered softly, squeezing him tighter. "Stay here and look at the wall. Put your nose to it and don't move." "Dawn, where did your things go?" Darren asked quietly, feeling his wife squeeze him through his swim trunks. "What do you think happened to my clothes?" Dawn whispered. "I took it off in front of your friends, of course." They were delighted, and I was no less delighted. The boys even helped me take off some things. My clothes are now in a pile by the jacuzzi. I think the guys took it as souvenirs. "It's a shame you missed it, darling," she said with a slight grin. "Oh God, Dawn," Darren muttered breathlessly, and then they both laughed again. "You sure know how to tease," he added. "Of course I know," Dawn purred. "Guys like it that way. Your friends just adore me. Today they are ready to do anything to get something to remember our evening. They want more than just kisses. They want a lot, and I think today I will give it to them." Yeah, I got it, honey," Darren muttered. "All three of them are so excited, just like you," Dawn whispered. "Today everyone wants sex." Darren gasped, unable to cope with the rolling emotions. Dawn pinned him against the wall, her hand gripping him tightly. She was on tiptoes, her lips brushing his ear. "And you want it just as much as they do, right?" Dawn asked playfully. Interesting idea. Now that you mention it, yes, I wouldn't say no," she said, smiling modestly. Darren froze. He had a hard time realizing that this could actually happen. His wife turned to face him and slid her swim trunks off his hips, smiling without taking her eyes off his. "What do you think, dear?" she asked again. "Would you mind if I let your drunk friends have fun with me tonight? Wouldn't you be upset if we ended up here in our marital bed? Would that make you excited or, on the contrary, make you angry?" Darren groaned, not knowing how to respond. He was overcome with unbearable excitement and confusion, but could not take his eyes off his wife. Dawn continued to tease him, looking at him with that same playful smile that drove him crazy. "Can I at least have a little pleasure if I can't make love to you?" Darren begged, trying to control his desires. No way," Dawn said. "I won't give you relaxation. I want you to stay horny all night. It will be much more interesting when you see your friends making out with me right in front of you." Darren closed his eyes in hopeless excitement, feeling desire overwhelm him. Dawn took him in her hand again, continuing to tease and stretch out this feeling of pleasure. "Open your eyes and look at me, Darren." Come on, just say yes and let me have what I want, she whispered softly. Oh God, Dawn. Come on, darling, say yes. Darren was on edge when he finally gave in and nodded. Dawn smiled widely, her eyes lighting up. Is it true? She asked, as if she were playing with a child. Yes, 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 he muttered, finally giving in. Good boy, Dawn whispered and let him go. She turned around, took the bikini out of the drawer and threw it on the bed. Darren remained standing against the wall, trying to recover. Dawn hummed softly to herself as she combed her dark, shiny hair. Take the guy's swimming trunks and put on yours, stupid, she said without turning around. I'll join you soon. I want to freshen up my makeup a little and tidy up my hair. Yeah, okay, honey, Darren said, pulling on his swim trunks and finding things for his friends. Thank you, honey, for agreeing to this, Dawn said as he left the room. You're just gold, a real gift from fate. You make good money and are so, how should I put it, flexible. You tease me, but I still adore you. I love you, Dawn, Darren said, looking back at her. And I love you, she whispered back, blowing him a kiss. I can't wait to see you get jealous. I'm going to make you green with envy, darling. When Dawn left the house, she was already in her skimpy bikini. Darren and his friends looked at her in fascination when she appeared on the threshold. There was applause and whistles of approval. Do you like what you see, boys? She asked with a satisfied smile, showing off her body. Of course, Mark and Dale answered at the same time, after which Mark added, Dawn, you're driving me crazy. That's the whole point, honey, Dawn replied. The bikini she changed into was so sheer that Darren could see the shape of her breasts through the thin fabric. The bikini Dawn had changed into was so sheer that Darren could see the shape of her breasts through the thin fabric. To complete the look, Dawn wore matching high heels. She always insisted that her outfits be perfectly coordinated. Darren wanted to grab her and carry her to bed, but all the guys wanted the same thing. Oh God, I'm so horny today, Dawn announced, twirling, swaying, sipping wine, and turning to the beat of the music. I need a real man today. Oh, how I need a plus-size man. All four men burst into laughter. Mark stood behind Dawn and wrapped his arm around her waist. Yes, as always, Peter commented. I can help you with this, Mark whispered in her ear. I'm sure I'm man enough for you, Dawn. Laughter was heard again. Well, I was actually thinking about Darren, Dawn replied with a playful smile, looking at her husband as her body pressed against the large bulging mound in the swim trunks Darren had lent to Mark. Usually my husband takes care of me, you know. Usually? Darren asked sharply, smiling at his sly wife. Dawn laughed, her pretty face blushing slightly. Mark quietly kissed her earlobe. Darren shook his head as Peter and Dale continued to laugh and tease. Mark moved to kiss Dawn's neck. She closed her eyes and sighed softly, purring in pleasure as she tilted her head slightly to give Mark more room to kiss. Well, calm down, honey, Dawn said quietly with her eyes closed. You know that I am a faithful wife. Only one man for life. So, Mark, kiss me there again. It's so nice. The men burst into laughter again. Dawn joined in their fun. Darren, meanwhile, began to blush as he watched what was happening. Let me try it too, Dale suggested, coming closer. Dawn laughed cheerfully. Darren watched as Dale approached his wife. He gently moved her hair to the side and began to kiss her ear, caressing it. Peter, not lagging behind, took a step forward. Darren froze in place, breathing heavily. The three friends were pressed close to his wife as she enjoyed the attention they were giving her. She quietly giggled and panted, surrounded by men who admired her body. Oh, that feels so good, Pete, Dawn whispered. Yes, that's it. Kiss me there. Do you like it? Peter asked, without taking his lips off her neck. Yeah, I like it, honey, Dawn breathed. For a while, the only sounds were sweet kisses, soft whispers, and heavy breathing of Dawn, enjoying the way the men caressed her body. Darren watched with bated breath, his excitement growing as his wife remained the center of attention. Well, so what? Are we going to the jacuzzi or not? Darren suddenly blurted out, trying to pull himself together and feeling the first wave of jealousy. Of course, Dawn responded enthusiastically, avoiding Peter's kiss on the lips. Let's go, guys. We can continue playing in the jacuzzi. Dawn wrapped her arm around Dale's waist. Mark immediately hugged her from the other side. She kicked off her high heels with a joyful scream, and they all crossed the terrace to the large, glowing jacuzzi. Soon all five were already in the warm, bubbling water. Everyone had drinks, and the children slept peacefully in the house. They are provided with complete privacy, away from the prying eyes of neighbors. "Oh God, this wine is terrible," Dawn commented, taking the last sips from her glass. "More please, dear." Darren smiled. He reached for the bottle standing on the edge of the jacuzzi. Dawn handed him the empty glass and waved it cheerfully in the air. The husband came closer and poured her wine to the brim. Dawn sat back down with a sigh of relief, and the three men immediately clung to her, hugging her from all sides. She took another sip of the disgusting wine while her male admirers continued their caresses. "Are you all right there, honey?" she asked her husband with an innocent smile a few minutes later. "You don't feel lonely, do you?" "No, no, it's okay," Darren whispered, not taking his loving gaze off her. "I love you so much, Dawn." "And I love you, honey," Dawn replied, closing her eyes and sighing slightly, as if under hypnosis, while the hands of her husband's friends continued to slide over her body. "I am so lucky to have such a sweet and accommodating husband like you." Nobody wanted to carry on empty talk. All five of them felt excitement, which was growing every minute. Darren continued to drink, not noticing how quickly he was emptying the glass. His thoughts were confused, and his mind was clouded from alcohol and his own feelings. He stared blankly at the three men pressing against his wife from different sides. Their bodies, immersed in water and illuminated by a bluish light, seemed strange and almost unreal to him. Mark enjoyed her body, pressing his lips to her damp black hair while his fingers gently touched her cheek. Dawn silently looked at Mark with a languid expression in her eyes. Peter wrapped his arm around her waist, his other hand caressing her thigh as his beer bottle bobbed in the churning water. Peter kissed her neck, and Dale, kneeling in front of Dawn, occasionally blocked Darren's view as he leaned down to press his lips to her neck and ear. "This is so exciting," Darren whispered, running his hand into his swimming trunks. "Oh God, Dawn, this is so sexy, this is so." "They really attacked me, didn't they, darling?" Dawn whispered through quiet sighs of pleasure. "Your friends surrounded me from all sides." "Yes, they are all around you, oh God." Darren couldn't help but smile. His flirtatious wife was enjoying this moment, and it made him happy. She got what she wanted, three men admired by her beauty and passion. Everything happened according to her script, and no one tried to stop her or spoil the fun. But Darren wasn't sure his excitement wouldn't turn to jealousy as things progressed. Mark kissed Dawn on the lips first. Darren's wife laughed and squealed from the man's attention as Mark began his movements. Darren's best friend ran his hand over Dawn's shoulders. She turned her head and looked at Mark with a seductive smile on her face. She turned for a moment and looked at her husband. Darren's heart was pounding in his chest. It was hard for him to breathe. He didn't look away. "Are you okay with this, Darren?" asked his wife, her eyes sparkling with excitement, an absent-minded smile on her face, while Mark leaned down and kissed her ear. "Aren't you jealous there, honey?" "No, no, not yet, Dawn," Darren replied. "Is it true?" "Oh, it's a pity," Dawn returned. "The boys and I will have to put in more effort." "Sassy bitch," Darren whispered. Peter and Dale looked up from their sweet, wet business. Both men smiled at Darren. They hugged their friend's wife from behind. Peter stroked her thigh and sides, while Dale gently kneaded her breasts through the thin fabric of her bikini. "I want to take your top off, Dawn," Dale whispered, sliding his hand over her breasts from behind. "I want to take off all your clothes." Dawn laughed quietly. She screamed and whimpered as Dale gently squeezed her breasts through the thin material of her swimsuit. Peter laughed. He ran his fingers along the inside of her thigh and then up. Peter caressed her through the fabric of her bikini. Dawn started screaming again. You are such crazy, horny boys, Dawn whispered with delight. I want all three of you at once. I want you so much. I want to have sex with you in the jacuzzi. There was laughter. Will you get on your knees and please me, Dawn? Asked Peter. Of course, Pete, Dawn answered quietly and seriously. Don't ask stupid questions. I want to have real dirty sex with you, Dale added, finishing his drink, placing the bottle on the edge of the jacuzzi and squeezing her breasts with both hands. I've always dreamed of having sex with you. You perverted, horny bastard, I know how much you want me, Dawn whispered as Peter pressed himself against her. There was loud laughter. Darren just watched. He took a long sip of beer, and it went down his throat. He began coughing heavily and choking. Darren, his wife said sharply to him, you don't mind if Mark kisses me, right? Jesus, just do it, Darren snapped. Do it, just do it, for God's sake. Peter and Dale grinned. Dawn turned to her husband with a beaming smile and then turned back to Mark. She parted her lips and froze in anticipation. Mark leaned in and their lips touched. Dawn sighed quietly in pleasure and closed her eyes. She ran her fingers along Mark's cheek, pulling him closer. A quiet, greedy moan escaped from their mouths. Great, said Peter. Oh, sweet Jesus, Darren breathed after a sharp, short sigh escaped him. Darren finished his beer, belched loudly, and threw the empty bottle behind him. He looked at his wife and best friend sitting across from him. His mind was swimming. The scene seemed so strange. Mark and Dawn kissed passionately right in front of him. Time seemed to stand still in this erotic, unreal movement. The cool, watery glow caressed the wet participants with its soft azure light. Mark and Dawn moved slowly. Their heads turned from side to side again and again. Their open mouths slid over each other. Lips smacked loudly. The tongues penetrated deeper. Mark ran his hand over Dawn's wet, dark head. She gently ran her fingers over Adam's apple and neck. Now it's my turn, Mark, Dale demanded quietly. I want to kiss Dawn too. Mark and Dawn broke the kiss with wet smacking sounds. Dawn, smiling, laughed in Mark's face until the thin stream of saliva connecting them was cut off. Dale put his hand on her shoulder and stroked it gently. Dawn turned to him with a smile. Come here, Dawn, Dale said desperately. Careful, honey, Dawn whispered. Be gentle with me. I want you so much. I know, Dale, honey. I know you're on edge, honey. Dale hugged Darren's wife. She laughed. She closed her beautiful dark eyes, ran her hands over his face, and leaned down to kiss Dale on his open lips. She gasped, moaned, and then slowly exhaled loudly through her nose. Their bodies turned so that Dawn was in Dale's lap, facing him. Dale ran his hand over her body and slid between her legs. Okay, Dale, Mark whispered. Warm it up for me. Yes, kiss her, man, Peter hissed lustfully. I'll make her please me when she's warmed up. Oh my God, I can't wait. And then I'll have a special kind of sex with her, Mark added. Peter took Dawn from Dale. Soon the three men took turns kissing her on the lips. Dale greedily enjoyed his friend's wife. Peter reached for the strings holding her bikini top in place and slowly untied them. Dawn made no attempt to stop him. A moment later, her wet swimsuit was tossed aside, revealing her beautiful breasts. She soon found herself in Peter's arms, and he and Dawn began kissing passionately. Darren watched as they swirled in the churning water, merging in a kiss. Then Mark kissed Dawn, then Dale. Darren's wife laughed with delight as she was passed from one horny man to another. Mark was the one who took Dawn's swimsuit off. He didn't consult his best friend or even glance at Darren. Dawn screamed, and the three men laughed as Mark slid his fingers along the edges of her swim trunks and pulled them down as Dawn playfully swayed her hips from side to side, squealing. That's it, Dale commented, licking his lips and watching as Dawn finally got rid of her clothes. Finally. Bye, Mark exclaimed, throwing his swimsuit outside the hot tub as Dawn, Peter, and Dale burst into laughter. At this point, Darren decided to get out of the jacuzzi. He was drunk and suddenly felt depressed and jealous. He needed some fresh air. He needed a break from this obscene spectacle. He paused for a moment longer. His wife was kissing Peter again. She no longer noticed her husband's presence. Peter didn't pay attention to Darren either. Mark caressed her, and Dale kissed her back, squeezing her breasts at the same time. The four were engrossed in each other, their lips smacking, muffled sighs and moans coming out. "I'm going out for a little while to get some fresh air," Darren said quietly as he stood up, continuing to watch as Mark pulled his swim trunks off and tossed them aside. I, I'll be back soon. I'll get more drinks for everyone." Darren looked at the large size of his best friend in the blue light of the water. Mark was ready to have sex with Dawn. Darren turned around and climbed out of the jacuzzi. He grabbed a towel and walked across the back porch. Entered the house. Water was dripping from it. He was drunk and on fire. Darren stood transfixed, his gaze trained on the jacuzzi where something was happening that he could not have predicted in any of his worst-case scenarios. What should have been a relaxing evening with friends turned into something he never seemed to expect. Everything happened at such a speed that he had no time to comprehend. He blinked a couple of times, as if hoping that if he closed his eyes and opened them again, this would all turn out to be some kind of ridiculous dream, and his wife, Dawn, would not be standing there, participating in this strange and embarrassing scene. Peter, who had always seemed the calmest and most level-headed of the group, now sat on the edge of the jacuzzi, truly relaxed, as if the whole world was his personal stage. He positioned himself right in the middle of the action, his legs spread wide, his arms resting relaxed at his sides, and a grin on his face that Darren had never seen before. That grin was as if Peter knew something the others didn't, as if he understood a game that everyone around him had just started playing, but no one had yet understood the rules of this game. And so, Dawn, his wife, who for all the years of marriage seemed to Darren to be a calm, homely, simple woman, was now between Peter's legs. He could do nothing but just look at her shiny tanned back, shoulders, and arms. This was his wife, the person he had shared his entire life with, and now she was sharing something completely different with Peter and his friends. Darren glanced at Peter's face. Peter laughed, his eyes sparkling with excitement, and from time to time he glanced at Mark and Dale, who were standing nearby. Mark was always the guy who found a way to make everyone around him laugh in any situation, and Dale, well, Dale was the one who always stood on the sidelines, but at the most unexpected moment, he came up with an idea that made everyone feel awkward, but funny. At this point, Mark decided that simply observing what was happening was no longer enough. He took a step forward, walking around the other side of the jacuzzi until he was behind Dawn. Her bare thighs slowly began to rise out of the water, as if it were part of some pre-orchestrated performance. Darren could see Mark wasting no time in getting into a comfortable position behind her. And then, suddenly, something happened that Darren never expected. This was the moment when he could no longer ignore reality. His own wife, Dawn, screamed as Mark resolutely took his seat, pushing her forward. Darren shuddered as if he had been doused with cold water. That was the moment when reality suddenly hit him over the head. He wanted to say something, wanted to intervene, but the words got stuck somewhere deep in his throat. He was a spectator in his own life, as if he were watching someone else's movie, and at the same time he understood that this was something real, not a game. Peter's loud laughter broke through his thoughts. It was not just laughter, but some kind of frankly victorious, almost solemn laughter, like that of a person who had just won a huge prize in the lottery. Peter, still laughing, looked at Mark, then at Dale, who was still standing to the side, as if waiting for his turn. Dale was clearly uncomfortable with not being actively involved yet, and he shifted nervously from foot to foot, smiling like a teenager on a first date. Meanwhile, Mark continued his actions, and Peter, as if it was not enough for him to just sit, decided to take full control of the situation. He gently placed his hand on the back of Dawn's head, as if by chance, guiding her movements. Dawn seemed to pause for a moment, but then, without much resistance, she continued to follow whatever was happening. Darren was starting to feel really uneasy. He felt that this was no longer his party, not his space, not his life. It was all like a strange movie in which he was invited, but he could not understand what his role was. At that moment, he heard Peter begin to get up, and Darren instinctively turned away, realizing that something was about to happen that he definitely did not want to see. But even when he turned away, he could still hear the laughter. That damn laugh was both joyful and humiliating. Explosions of joy were heard that echoed throughout the courtyard. He could hear Peter and Mark loudly discussing everything that was happening, as if it was something completely normal and fun. Dawn, his wife, suddenly laughed along with them, as if it was some huge prank that she had suddenly gotten involved in. "Oh God, Pete, you dirty bastard," she exclaimed, her voice mixing with the laughter of everyone around her. Darren couldn't stand it. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart beat faster than usual. He wanted to leave, but his legs seemed rooted to the spot. "Now it's my turn," he heard Dale's voice behind him, who could no longer contain his impatience. Peter was still laughing, not noticing that Darren had stepped aside. Mark continued in the same rhythm, without slowing down his actions. "Oh God, Dale, at least let me come to my senses." Darren heard his wife's voice, filled with the same laughter that just a minute ago seemed wild and unacceptable to him. He heard her begging for a break, but he knew that these were just words that everyone perceived as part of a joke. Darren finally pulled himself together. He slowly turned around and headed into the house. He needed to leave, to close himself off from this chaos, this unreal world that suddenly became his reality. With every step, he heard less and less laughter and conversations behind him. He wanted only one thing: silence. Laughter and talking were heard again, but Darren could no longer hear them. Darren noticed his wife after some undetermined time. He heard her high heels click loudly on the hard floor as she walked slowly through the house. He could also hear the muffled laughter of his guests from the back porch. Darren finished his bottle of beer. He placed it on the kitchen counter along with the other empty bottles. He swallowed and looked out the window. He felt terribly excited. He was drunk. His thoughts were wandering, but he was still excited. The clicking sound of Dawn's heels grew louder as she approached. Darren exhaled, laughed quietly, and felt Dawn press her slender body against his back. He sighed and closed his eyes as she slowly ran her hand over his naked body. He felt her hot breath on his skin, her soft lips touched his back. The desire to have sex with her almost overwhelmed him. Darren turned to face her. He looked into her beautiful brown eyes. I looked at her full lips. Her dark red lipstick was smudged, leaving a bloody trail around her mouth. Dawn gave him a sly grin. Darren leaned over and kissed her. Their open mouths met, and their tongues slowly merged together. It was a passionate and dirty kiss. Dawn interrupted him after a minute. Darren was shaking. Dawn laughed as she looked at him. "Hey, sweet, horny stranger, I thought you were hiding here." Dawn smiled, teasing him. "Why did you just run away and leave us? Couldn't stand the heat in the jacuzzi, huh?" "I'm surprised you noticed I was gone," Darren said with a smile, stroking her cheek. "You've been so busy. Today, of course, you have a lot of worries." "Yes, of course, I have my hands full, but I always notice when you're not around. Honey, you just left without saying a word. I thought you'd be glued to your seat. Turns out you can't stand it, huh?" "You like an attentive audience when you put on a show for others," Darren said, kissing her hair tenderly. "Of course, absolutely, I love an audience," Dawn replied quietly, looking down at the bulge in her husband's swim trunks. "I like to turn on boys and make someone stand at attention in your pants. I noticed that you disappeared. I thought maybe you ran away to satisfy yourself alone. Or were you consumed by jealousy, him?" Darren laughed quietly. Dawn and her husband kissed again. It was noisy and humid. Dawn broke the kiss after a minute. Darren exhaled into his wife's face. For a moment, it seemed to him that Dawn had drugged him. "Do you feel them when you kiss me? Can you smell them on my breath?" Darren gasped and Dawn smirked. "So why did you disappear?" "I just wanted. I went to check on the kids." "Seriously, did you really notice that I wasn't there?" Darren asked doubtfully. Dawn grinned. She bit her lower lip softly and laughed quietly. Darren smiled at her. He slowly closed his eyes and sighed. "Of course, I noticed you weren't there, honey," Dawn whispered in his ear. I'm always curious about you. I need to know where you are at any moment. I didn't notice that I abandoned you today. Sorry, baby. I promise I'll make it right in the dirtiest way possible, honey. Yeah, Darren said with a hint of skepticism in his voice. You didn't notice that you abandoned me, did you? Dawn burst out laughing. Yes, of course, dear, of course, certainly, dear, she said quietly with enthusiasm. Just wait, mister. I will give you the best moments in bed. I promise. I'll let you draw me like Pete and Dale in the hot tub. Darren gasped. Dawn looked at him slyly, slowly ran her tongue over her lips, and looked at her husband without blinking. She looked so excited. Yeah, okay, Darren said, breathing heavily. How about today? Oh, well, not today, honey, Dawn answered quickly and evasively. But definitely next time, very soon, dear, I promise. Oh, God, Darren whispered desperately. I need this so bad, Dawn. I feel hungry. I know, baby, Dawn purred. Mom knows how excited you are. I'll play with you, just not today. You know that Mom has other plans for today. Mom will play with your friends today. Oh God, Dawn, other plans? You mean you're not done there yet? Of course not, dear. We are not finished yet. The end is still far away. Darren nervously ran his fingers through his hair and smiled at his hot wife. They were silent for several moments. Dawn playfully slapped his chest and rolled her eyes. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, and she burst into a sexy smile and then a laugh. Her long dark hair was wet and sticky, and she was naked. We'll be doing this all night, most of the weekend, Dawn said softly, as if her husband was stupid. You will have to look after the children. Maybe you can take them to your mom tomorrow. Darren swallowed and nodded. Dawn turned away from her husband, humming and slowly rocking her hips, moving in place. She drank wine while standing at the kitchen counter, teasing him. Darren continued to watch her. Finally, Dawn turned to him, drained her glass of Shiraz, handed her husband the empty glass, and watched silently as he took a new bottle, opened it, and poured her more wine. I wish I had bought a better bottle, Dawn complained, taking the glass from Darren and wrinkling her cute nose, inhaling the aroma of the wine. Jenny recommended it to me. I don't know why I listened to her. She has such a disgusting taste in wine. She has never recommended anything good. Dawn chatted nonstop, and Darren watched her silently. Finally, Dawn noticed the expression on her husband's face. He looked confused, worried, and tense. What? Dawn asked irritably. Why are you looking at me like that, honey? Are you really going to sleep with my friends in our bed tonight? Dawn inhaled sharply, her jaw dropping in mock surprise at the suggestion. Her face turned red, and she started laughing at Darren. Jealous boy, Dawn whispered. It's too late to complain now, don't you think? Dawn, Darren asked with a smile, answer the question. Dawn continued to laugh and refused to answer. Darren asked his wife again and again. He started to get desperate. This is our marital bed, Dawn. We conceived our children in this bed. Honey, don't be angry. Answer me, Dawn. Of course, she answered softly. We've just started. We are already tired of the jacuzzi. The guys are just drying themselves off. We'll all go to bed together. It'll be all night. Honey, I thought I already told you. And you will use protection in case. No, Dawn answered with a smile. This is, as you said, the bed in which children are conceived. We'll just take the risk, love. Oh God, Dawn, Darren hissed. At this point, their conversation was interrupted by Mark, one of Darren's friends. Hey, where are you, Dawn, honey? Mark called, causing Darren and his wife to shut up and turn their heads towards the voice. The guys want to continue with you. Here, Mark, my love, Dawn answered. I'm in the kitchen, guys. Are you going to watch the fireworks, Darren? Dawn asked softly as his three naked friends came into the kitchen, surrounding her and starting to kiss and caress her naked body. You can sit back and just watch if you want. I bought you this fool's cap and chair for your birthday a couple of weeks ago. Seems like now is a good time to use them, don't you think? Darren's three friends burst out laughing. Dawn started kissing Dale. Her husband gasped quietly. Dawn and Dale sighed heavily. Darren watched as his wife slowly ran her tongue over his friend's lips. Dawn broke the kiss with a loud, wet sound. Maybe later, Darren finally said, watching his hot wife, who was beaming with excitement. A moment later, Dawn was passionately kissing Peter. Darren cleared his throat. The kiss continued. Then it ended. Eh? What were you saying, honey? Dawn asked, ignoring her husband, completely immersed in the view in front of her. Oh God, just look at you boys with your big toys. One more kiss. Dawn absorbed one of her friends again as Darren quietly watched. Maybe I'll stop by later, Dawn. Ah, really, Darren, Dawn said after another broken kiss, sounding disappointed as Mark caressed her right ear and Peter covered her left ear and neck with kisses. Why don't you join in, put on a cap, sit on a high chair, and satisfy yourself? We want to laugh at you, honey, to humiliate you. This will make sex so much more enjoyable. Darren gasped. A vision flashed through his mind of his beautiful, naked, sweat-soaked wife being passed from hand to hand by his three large, horny, and domineering friends. Darren imagined Mark, Peter, and Dale doing their best to enjoy the body of the woman he loved and was married to. Then a picture appeared in his head of him sitting naked on a high chair with a cap on his head, satisfying himself while his friends and wife laughed at him and humiliated him mercilessly. What do you say, honey? Dawn spurred him on. I will make fun of you so much that you will have a complex, and you will hardly be able to function normally after this. Darren was breathing heavily with pleasure. His hands were shaking. He was so tempted to say yes, but finally shook his head. His three friends could be quite cruel when they started out. Darren felt that his wife was determined to deeply humiliate and belittle him this time. Darren was on the verge of agreeing, but at the last moment he said no. Maybe I'll stop by later, Dawn. Yeah, sure, no problem, honey, whatever you want, Dawn said, hugging Peter and Dale. Come on, boys, let's make love. See you later, Mr. Darren, the love of my life. The noise coming from behind the closed doors of the house finally tempted Darren to go in search of his wife and three friends. Darren sat in his favorite chair on the veranda with a warm bottle of beer slowly slipping from his fingers. He almost fell asleep again. He had drifted in and out of sleep several times in the past few hours. He heard faint sounds of wild laughter, broken sentences, moans and screams coming from the house through the slightly open back doors. Darren suddenly felt the urge to hear and see more. His three friends and wife were in the master bedroom. All four of them had been having fun there for a long time. It was a real marathon, just as Dawn had warned. If his dear wife Dawn and his friends were going to have a baby that night, at least he could be there to support them and show his solidarity. The hell with it, Darren whispered, slowly rising from his chair, carefully placing the bottle of beer on the veranda between his legs, standing up and accidentally knocking over the bottle. Damn, how lucky, buddy. Darren watched as the amber foam poured out of the bottle, spread across the veranda, and formed a small puddle. He watched this thoughtfully, then shrugged and raised his hands. Closing the sliding doors behind him, he went into the house. With every step, the sounds coming from behind the closed door to the master bedroom became louder and clearer. With every careful, silent step, Darren got closer to seeing what he so desperately wanted to see. Walking through the dark living room and along the narrow corridor, he moved forward. His heart was pounding. He was breathing heavily and quickly. Soon he found himself in front of the door and stopped, looking at it. Darren stood in the dim hallway, looking at the locked bedroom door as if it were the last obstacle to the truth. He didn't want to go in, but he couldn't resist a strange feeling, a mixture of curiosity, mistrust, and some kind of inexplicable anxiety. Muffled but completely obvious sounds were heard behind the door. Muffled voices, rustling sounds, and something else that sounded like laughter. His heart began to beat faster, as if warning him that he was about to witness something for which his mind was definitely not ready. "Oh, Dale," the voice of his wife, Dawn, sounded loud, although muffled. He might have barely noticed if her intonation hadn't been so. Harsh, too filled with some strange energy that he had never heard before. This is simply incredible. Darren frowned. The words hung in the air like heavy smoke. What exactly is incredible, he thought. Fear began to creep up his spine, covering his mind like a cold stream. He froze, listening even more carefully when another voice, that of his best friend, Dale, added, "I agree with you, Don. Finally, we did it." The tone was strange, contented, as if they had both completed some project or solved a long-standing problem. But what exactly? Darren knew that they had neither business together nor any joint plans, at least none that he knew about. His inner voice, previously only a whisper, now shouted, "What is going on here?" He took a cautious step forward, silently approaching the door, as if he hoped that his movement would not be noticed. He wanted to come up and just ask, "Hey, what's all this weird talk?" But something in him said that it was better not to do this. Suddenly, a chuckle came from the room, and Darren felt goosebumps run down his spine. It wasn't just laughter, it was the same laughter that horror movie characters hear before something bad happens. The laugh was feminine, but somehow sinister, teasing. Darren couldn't stand it. He carefully placed his hand on the cold doorknob, his fingers trembling, as if touching the door itself was some kind of act from which there would be no turning back. It seemed to him that the sounds outside the door became even louder, as if his approach gave them the opportunity to go outside. He heard heavy breathing, as if someone, or even several people, were trying to get themselves in order after something physically difficult. Gathering his courage, Darren turned the knob. The door opened smoothly, without a single creak, as if even she understood that she needed to be extremely careful. Taking a step forward, he found himself inside. The light in the room was soft, almost dim, as if an atmosphere of intimacy or some special event was deliberately created here. One lamp on the bedside table provided only a small amount of illumination, but it was enough for Darren to see everything that was happening in front of him. What he saw made him freeze in place. In the middle of the room, on a huge bed, his wife Dawn was sitting, and around her were his friends Dale, Mark, and Peter. They all seemed to be absorbed in some strange ritual, and it was not immediately possible to understand what exactly was happening. But there was a special atmosphere in the room, a mixture of tension, playfulness, and, most importantly, an incomprehensible mystery. Darren felt like a stranger, caught up in some secret meeting to which no one had invited him. Dawn was sitting upright on the bed, her face shining with some kind of joyful, even solemn expression, as if she had achieved her main goal in life. Mark, his old friend, was reclining on the bed next to her, as if he was resting after some physical activity, but he was smiling and exchanging jokes with the others. Darren could not immediately understand what kind of situation this was, either a party or some kind of friendly game. And Peter, who always loved to joke, was on the edge of the bed and, apparently, was not going to miss the opportunity to insert his barb. "Well, hello, hero," Peter proclaimed loudly, raising his hand as if greeting an old friend after a long absence. "We got a little carried away here. Everything is fine. How are you?" Darren stood there, trying to understand what was going on. There was an old stool on the floor near the foot of the bed, with a nightcap lying haphazardly next to it, perhaps something from a school play or an old party. This stool looked as if it had been accidentally pulled out of the closet for a completely different purpose, and now it was forgotten in the bustle of what was happening. Dale, always calm and reasonable, looked as if he was in complete control of the situation. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, casually leaning against the pillow, and judging by the expression on his face, everything that happened to him was nothing more than another ordinary evening spent in the company of friends. He even looked up at Darren and nodded slightly, as if to say, "Hey, this isn't as weird as it seems." But Darren was completely unsure that anything here could be normal. "Darren, relax. We just decided to joke a little," Mark added, lazily stretching on the bed. "You know how much we love old jokes." Darren looked at him nervously, then at the stool and cap on the floor. Something about this scene still didn't add up. The words of his friends sounded light and casual, but his inner voice, which had only muttered before, now almost shouted that this was not an ordinary situation. It seemed that there was something else hidden in this room, something that he could not yet realize. Darren wanted revenge. He wanted to teach this bitch a lesson. He devised a cunning, complex, and intricate plan to punish his beautiful, slutty wife and restore his power in the house. His reputation suffered as much as his wife's body, which took many blows during this time. In the end, only his faithful Chihuahua, Pebbles, still respected him, although even that was questionable. It was necessary to act. Darren developed a plan in consultation with Pebbles. "I won't stand for this anymore, Pebbles," Darren muttered relentlessly to his confused and growling dog, while his stunningly beautiful wife frolicked in bed with his friends, brother, and boss. "My woman sleeps with all my friends, even my boss and brother, but not with me. I will give her real retribution." The plan was simple. Darren decided to put it into action one morning when he had nothing else to do. He was supposed to be at work, but he took sick leave and got the day off. Darren sat in his discreet car, parked in a secluded area near the house. He was wearing only a cloak with nothing underneath. He waited patiently for Dawn to take their children to school and return home to attack his unsuspecting woman. Darren sneaked into the house. He heard Dawn talking on the phone. She walked slowly back and forth in the bedroom, talking. Darren walked carefully through the living room and down the hallway, heading towards his wife. He took off his cloak and threw it on the floor. He was naked, excited, and ready for action. "Yes, of course, Dale, dear," Dawn said tenderly into the phone. "Yes, of course, I'm wearing the same underwear and stiletto heels that you bought me." There was a quiet feminine laugh, and Dawn continued. "Yeah, it looks amazing on me. Yes, I look so sexy right now. When will you arrive, honey? In 1 hour. Oh, this will be wonderful, Dale. You can take it all off me when you come, and I'll make you feel good, Dale. Yes, yes, I will definitely do that." Her soft, seductive laugh was heard again. At that moment, Darren suddenly appeared in the bedroom. Dawn gasped in shock. Her beautiful eyes opened wide. Darren burst into the room, almost falling. The wife was stunned. She was simply in shock. "Him!" Darren exclaimed. "Oh my God, what the hell?" Dawn shouted into the phone. "Don't come. Stay away. I won't be able to see you today. Goodbye." Dawn hung up before Dale could say anything. "Oh God, Darren, what are you doing at home? You should be at work." "I took the day off, Dawn," Darren shouted. "I'm here to take revenge. I'll show you what revenge means." "What kind of revenge are you talking about, honey?" Dawn screamed in a shrill voice. "Now I'll show you, unfaithful woman, you damn Jezebel." Darren continued to shout. Darren ran to his wife and grabbed her. Dawn began to squeal and try to fight back with her hands and feet. He picked up his beautiful wife and carried her to the edge of the bed. He sat down. Dawn was in his lap, face down, her thighs exposed. "Darren, you bastard, don't you dare." But Darren didn't listen to her. He raised his hand and brought it down with force. His palm hit the lacy back of her underwear. A sharp bang was heard in the bedroom. Dawn began to struggle and continued to scream. And "You bastard." Darren hit his wife again and again. Ow. Darren didn't stop until her bottom was red and burning with pain. He noticed Pebbles appear in the doorway, watching him. The dog barked, as if encouraging its owner. Its tongue stuck out. Awu. Finally, Darren stopped punishing her. Dawn was breathing heavily. Both were excited and nervous. Darren turned his wife over onto her back. She screamed again. Pebbles yawned, raised his paw, did his business, and walked away. In a few moments, Darren was inside his beautiful wife. The sounds of their bodies colliding filled the house. "Oh my God, Darren," Dawn screamed. Meanwhile, Pebbles crossed the kitchen, went out into the backyard, and lay down on the soft green grass under the bright sun, eventually getting a little burned on her nose and ears. The burning ritual was completed. Strong government, good leadership, and strict order were restored to this wayward house. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.